I should have known something was wrong when Nora started wearing perfume to take out the trash. My name is Grant Holloway, and I design gardens for people who think weeds are a personality trait. 42 years old, married for 8 years, to a woman who used to laugh at my jokes and now barely looks up from her phone when I speak. But that Tuesday morning in March, as I watched my wife of 8 years spray herself with expensive perfume before allegedly heading to Jessica's house for a girls' weekend, I felt that familiar itch between my shoulder blades that meant trouble. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. You sure you need that much perfume for Jessica's? I asked, sipping my coffee and watching Nora check herself in the hallway mirror for the third time. She didn't even turn around. Jessica likes when we dress up. You know how she is? I knew how Jessica was, all right. Jessica Martinez was Nora's supposed best friend, a woman who wore sweatpants to her own birthday party, and thought makeup was something you did for weddings and funerals. The idea of Jessica requesting perfume was like asking a fish to critique your hiking boots. Right, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Well, have fun with your girls' weekend. Nora finally turned, and for just a second I caught something in her expression. Guilt? Annoyance? Hard to tell with Nora these days. Everything about her had become a mystery wrapped in designer clothes I couldn't remember her buying. Don't wait up, she said, grabbing her overnight bag. The same bag she'd been packing every other weekend for the past 2 months. Jessica wants to start early with the wine tasting. Wine tasting. Right. Because Jessica, who drank beer from the bottle and called wine fancy grape juice, had suddenly developed sophisticated taste buds. I watched through the kitchen window as Nora loaded her car, checking her phone twice before backing out of the driveway. The same routine every time, the same lies, delivered with the same practiced smile. Most husbands might confront their wives at this point, demand answers, make accusations. But I'm not most husbands. I'm a landscape architect, which means I understand patience. I understand that the best gardens aren't rushed, and the most beautiful revenge takes time to grow. Besides, I had a theory to test. After Nora's car disappeared around the corner, I finished my coffee, grabbed my keys, and drove to the local hardware store. Not for supplies, I had plenty of those. No, I drove to the hardware store because it was directly across from Jessica's apartment complex, and I wanted to see if my wife's car would show up there. It didn't. I sat in my truck for 2 hours, watching Jessica's building like some kind of suburban private investigator. Around noon, Jessica herself emerged from the building, wearing her usual uniform of yoga pants and an oversized sweater. She got in her beat-up Honda and drove away, probably to her job at the veterinary clinic. So either Jessica was the world's worst hostess, leaving her weekend guest alone in an empty apartment, or my wife was somewhere else entirely. I called Jessica's number. Hey, Grant. Jessica's voice was cheerful, slightly out of breath. What's up? Just wondering if you've seen Nora lately, I said, keeping my tone casual. She mentioned you two had plans. There was a pause, a long pause. In that pause, I heard the sound of my marriage cracking like ice on a frozen pond. Plans? Jessica said finally. We don't have any plans. I haven't talked to Nora in 2 weeks? Maybe 3? The ice didn't just crack. It shattered completely. Oh, I said, managing to keep my voice steady. Must have misunderstood. Thanks, Jess. I hung up before she could ask any follow-up questions, before she could offer to call Nora, before she could accidentally blow up whatever game my wife was playing. So there it was. My wife wasn't at Jessica's house. She wasn't wine tasting or doing whatever activities she'd invented for her fictional girls' weekends. She was somewhere else, with someone else, living some other life that didn't include me. I sat in my truck, staring at Jessica's empty apartment building, and felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. Not heartbreak. I'd been expecting this for months. Not even anger, really. More like professional interest. You see, when you design landscapes for a living, you learn to see things others miss. You notice which plants are thriving and which ones are slowly fading. You understand that sometimes the most beautiful garden requires pulling out the diseased roots and starting fresh. And right now, looking at the ruins of my marriage, I was seeing possibilities. Not for reconciliation or counseling or any of that therapeutic bullshit. No, I was seeing something much more interesting. I was seeing revenge. But not the messy, emotional kind that lands you in jail or divorce court looking like the bad guy. The kind of revenge that takes planning. The kind that uses an opponent's own weaknesses against them. The kind that leaves you standing in your perfectly manicured garden while your enemies are left wondering what the hell just happened. I started my truck and drove home, already making mental notes. First, I needed information. Real information. Not the carefully constructed lies Nora had been feeding me. Then I needed a plan. And finally, I needed patience. Good thing patience was my specialty. The thing about lies is that they're like weeds. They spread quickly, but they also leave traces everywhere they go. And I've spent my entire adult life learning how to track down unwanted growth and eliminate it at the source. Monday morning, I called in sick to work. Not entirely a lie. Discovering your wife's double life does make you feel pretty nauseated. Instead of heading to the office, I drove to the cell phone store where Nora and I shared a family plan. I need to check the usage on my wife's phone, I told the bored-looking kid behind the counter. She thinks she's going over on data. 20 minutes and one fake concerned husband routine later, I had 3 months of Nora's call and text records printed out in my hands. Amazing what you can accomplish when you're the primary account holder and you remember to wear your wedding ring. Back in my truck, I spread the papers across the passenger seat and started looking for patterns. What I found was more illuminating than I'd expected. For the past 2 months, coinciding exactly with the start of Nora's mysterious girls' weekends, there had been a dramatic spike in calls and texts to one particular number. Dozens of them. Long conversations late at night when she thought I was asleep, text message sessions that lasted for hours. The number wasn't in her contacts list, at least not under a real name. It was saved as TC with a heart emoji. TC. How romantic. I plugged the number into a reverse lookup website and waited. The results came back quickly. Trey Dawson, age 44, married, owner of Dawson Creative Marketing. His address was listed as a high-end apartment complex downtown, the kind of place that charged $3,000 a month for the privilege of living in a glass box with a doorman. Trey Dawson. I'd heard that name before, but I couldn't place where. I pulled out my own phone and did a quick Google search. Dawson Creative Marketing had a slick website full of buzzwords and stock photos of attractive people pointing at laptops. Trey's bio described him as a visionary marketing strategist and thought leader in digital brand development. In other words, the kind of guy who charged premium prices to tell businesses they needed better social media presence. But there was something else. A photo gallery from a local business networking event, dated about 3 months ago. And there, smiling at the camera with a glass of wine in her hand, was my wife. The caption identified her as Nora Bennett, freelance copywriter. Bennett, her maiden name. The name she'd stopped using when we got married, but apparently had started using again for certain occasions. I stared at the photo for a long time. Nora looked happy. Really happy, in a way I hadn't seen in months. She was standing close to a tall man with perfectly styled hair and an expensive suit. Trey Dawson himself, according to the photo tags. The pieces were starting to come together, and I didn't like the picture they were forming. I drove home and went straight to Nora's home office, a converted spare bedroom where she did her freelance writing work. She'd always been protective of this space, claiming she needed privacy to concentrate. I'd respected that boundary for years. Time to stop being so respectful. Her desk was neat, organized, professional. But tucked in the back of the bottom drawer, behind a stack of old invoices, I found what I was looking for, a second phone, a cheap prepaid smartphone that I'd never seen before. My hands were shaking slightly as I powered it on. No password protection. Nora had always been careless about security. The phone contained exactly what I'd expected and exactly what I'd dreaded. Months of text messages between Nora and Trey. And they weren't discussing marketing strategies. Can't wait to see you this weekend. Tell Grant whatever you need to tell him. The hotel in Riverside was perfect. We should go back there next month. I've never felt this way about anyone. What we have is special. He still doesn't suspect anything. Sometimes I think he's completely oblivious. I sat in Nora's chair, reading through months of my wife's affair, and felt something strange happening inside me. The hurt was there, sure. The betrayal stung like hell. But underneath those expected emotions was something else. Something colder and more calculating. Relief. For months, I'd been questioning myself, wondering if I was imagining the distance between us, the way she'd stopped really seeing me, the feeling that I was living with a stranger who happened to share my last name. Now I knew I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. I was just married to a liar. I scrolled through more messages, building a timeline in my head. The affair had started about 4 months ago, apparently beginning as a professional relationship. Nora had been hired to write copy for Dawson Creative's website. Somewhere along the way, late-night strategy sessions had turned into something else. The really galling part was how sloppy they'd been. Trey was married too. His wife Whitney was mentioned several times in the messages, usually in the context of avoiding her. They'd been meeting at hotels, at his apartment when his wife was out of town, even at our house on days when I was supposed to be working late. Our house. Our bed, probably. I found one message from just last week that made my jaw clench. Grant's working on some big landscaping project this weekend. We'll have the whole place to ourselves Saturday afternoon. The big landscaping project. The Henderson estate redesign that I'd been excited to tell her about, proud of landing such a prestigious client. She listened to me talk about it over dinner, asked questions, seemed interested. She'd been interested, all right, just not in my work. I put the phone back exactly where I'd found it and sat in the quiet house thinking. Most men would confront their wives immediately, demand explanations, file for divorce, move out or kick her out or do something dramatic and emotional. But I'm not most men. I'm a landscape architect, which means I understand that the most effective changes happen slowly, systematically, with careful planning and perfect timing. Nora thought she was so clever, living her double life while keeping me in the dark. She thought I was oblivious, too boring or too trusting to figure out what was happening right under my nose. She was about to learn how wrong she was. But first, I needed to know more about Trey Dawson. If I was going to destroy my wife's affair, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. Who was this guy? What did he have that I didn't? And most importantly, what weaknesses could I exploit? I spent the rest of the afternoon doing research. Social media profiles, business records, local news articles. By evening, I had a pretty complete picture of Trey Dawson's life. He was everything I wasn't. Flashy where I was practical. Smooth where I was straightforward. The kind of guy who wore expensive suits and drove a BMW and probably had strong opinions about wine pairings. He was also married to Whitney Dawson, a local real estate agent who seemed to have her own successful career and an active social media presence. Their marriage looked perfect from the outside. Lots of photos from expensive restaurants and weekend getaways and charity events. I wondered if Whitney knew her husband was cheating. I wondered if she'd be interested to find out. But that was getting ahead of myself. First, I needed to catch them in the act. Get proof that even Nora couldn't lie her way out of. Then I could start thinking about what to do with that proof. I was still planning when I heard Nora's car in the driveway. I quickly closed all the browser windows and went to the kitchen, where I started making dinner like nothing had happened. "How was Jessica's?" I asked when she walked in, looking slightly rumpled and carrying her overnight bag. "Great," she said, not meeting my eyes. "We had a wonderful time, very relaxing." "Good," I said, stirring the pasta sauce. "I'm glad you're getting out more. You seem happier lately." She looked at me sharply, like she was trying to figure out if there was a hidden meaning in my words. But I kept my expression neutral, just a boring husband making dinner for his cheating wife. "Yeah," she said finally. "I am happier." "I bet you are," I thought. But I just smiled and asked if she wanted wine with dinner. The game was on. 2 weeks later, I was ready to make my move. 2 weeks of watching Nora lie to my face, of pretending I didn't know where she really spent her weekends, of playing the role of the oblivious husband while I gathered evidence and planned my strategy. The beautiful thing about being underestimated is that people get careless around you. They think you're not paying attention, not smart enough to connect the dots, too trusting to question their stories. Nora had been treating me like a piece of furniture for months, something useful that she barely noticed anymore. She was about to notice me. Friday morning, Nora announced another girls' weekend. Same routine, same lies, same overnight bag. This time, she claimed Jessica wanted to try some new wine bar in the next town over. "Sounds fun," I said, not looking up from my newspaper. "Tell Jess I said hi." "Will do," Nora said, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. She was wearing a new dress I'd never seen before, something red and clingy that she definitely hadn't bought for Jessica's benefit. I waited until her car was out of sight, then made my first call. "Whitney Dawson, this is Grant Holloway. I think we need to talk." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" "Not yet," I said. "But I know your husband, and I think you should know mine." Another pause, longer this time. When Whitney spoke again, her voice was carefully controlled. "What exactly are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that your husband and my wife have been having an affair for the past 4 months. I'm talking about the fact that right now, while you think Trey is at his office, he's actually at the Riverside Hotel with Nora. Room 237, if you're interested in confirming it yourself." The silence stretched so long I thought she might have hung up. Finally she spoke, and her voice was like ice. "How do you know all this?" "Because I've been watching them. Phone records, text messages, surveillance. I know everything, Mrs. Dawson. The question is, what are we going to do about it?" "We?" she said. "Our spouses think they're so clever," I said. "They think we're too stupid or too trusting to figure out what they're doing. Maybe it's time we showed them how wrong they are. Whitney was quiet for a moment. Then, "What did you have in mind?" "Meet me at the coffee shop on Main Street in an hour," I said. "And bring a notepad. We have some planning to do." Whitney Dawson turned out to be exactly what I'd expected. Sharp, well-dressed, and absolutely furious. She was also smarter than her cheating husband deserved, which made her the perfect ally for what I had in mind. "How long have you known?" she asked after I'd laid out all the evidence, copies of the text messages, hotel receipts I'd found in Nora's purse, even photos I'd taken of them entering Trey's apartment building together. "Couple of weeks," I said, "but I suspected for months. Your husband isn't as discreet as he thinks he is." Whitney's laugh was bitter. "Trey's never been discreet about anything. I should have seen this coming." She looked through the photos again, her jaw tightening. "That bastard told me he was working late on a big project, said he couldn't make it to my sister's wedding because of client timelines." "Let me guess," I said. "The same weekend Nora had a sudden girls' trip to visit her college roommate." "Probably." Whitney set the photos down and looked at me directly. "So what's your plan? Divorce lawyers? Private investigators? Public confrontation?" "Nothing that dramatic," I said. "I'm thinking something more educational. They want to sneak around and lie to us? Fine. Let's see how they handle some consequences." I outlined my plan. It was simple, elegant, and completely legal. Most importantly, it would hit both Trey and Nora where it would hurt them most: their reputations, their careers, and their comfortable little fantasy that they could have their cake and eat it too. Whitney listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she was smiling for the first time since we'd sat down. "You're more devious than you look," she said. "I design gardens for a living," I replied. "You learn patience, and you learn that sometimes the most effective way to deal with weeds is to let them think they're thriving, right up until you pull them out by the roots." "When do we start?" "Tonight," I said. "While they're at their romantic weekend getaway, we're going to plant some seeds of our own." The first part of the plan was simple: exposure. Trey and Nora thought they were invisible, that their affair was a secret between just the two of them. Time to expand their audience. Whitney and I spent Saturday afternoon visiting people. First, we went to see Nora's sister Lacey, who'd always prided herself on being the good sister, the one with the stable marriage and the moral high ground. Lacey's reaction to the photos and text messages was everything I'd hoped for. "That selfish snake," Lacey said, staring at a particularly damning text exchange, "after everything you've done for her, after how happy you two seemed." "We were happy," I said quietly. "At least, I thought we were." Lacey was already reaching for her phone. "I'm calling her right now. I'm going to give her a piece of my mind." "Actually," Whitney interrupted smoothly, "we were hoping you might help us with something a little more comprehensive." We explained our plan. Lacey's eyes got wider with each detail, but by the end, she was grinning like a kid planning a prank. "Oh, this is perfect," she said. "Nora always thought she was so much smarter than everyone else. Let's see how smart she feels when the whole family knows what kind of person she really is." Next, we visited Jessica. I'd been saving this conversation, knowing it would be the most satisfying. Jessica had been covering for Nora without even knowing it. Every time someone asked about the girls' weekends, Jessica would just smile and nod, assuming she'd forgotten making plans. "She's been using me as her alibi?" Jessica's voice got higher with each word. "For months? While I've been telling people what a great friend she is?" "I'm sorry you got dragged into this," I said. "I know you didn't know." "That manipulative—" Jessica caught herself, took a deep breath. "You know what? I'm done covering for her. I'm done being her convenient excuse. What can I do to help?" By Sunday evening, when Nora and Trey returned from their romantic weekend, Whitney and I had built a network. Lacey had already started making calls to family members. Jessica was prepared to set the record straight with anyone who asked about the girls' weekends, and Whitney had reached out to several of Trey's business contacts, not to make accusations, just to plant seeds of doubt. The trap was set. Now we just had to wait for them to walk into it. Nora came home Sunday night looking relaxed and happy. She kissed my cheek absently and started talking about her wonderful weekend with Jessica, how they'd discovered this amazing little wine bar, how they'd stayed up late talking about old times, how refreshing it was to get away from everything. I listened to every lie, nodding and smiling, while inside I counted down the hours until her world would start falling apart. "I'm glad you had fun," I said. "You deserve to be happy." And I meant it. She did deserve to be happy. She just didn't deserve to be happy at my expense. Built on a foundation of lies and betrayal, she was about to learn the difference. Monday morning brought the first crack in Nora's perfect facade. Her phone rang during breakfast. Her real phone, not the secret one she thought I didn't know about. "Hi, Lacey," she answered, her voice bright and cheerful. "What's up?" I couldn't hear Lacey's side of the conversation, but I could watch Nora's face change. The smile faded first, then her eyebrows drew together in confusion, then her mouth opened in what looked like the beginning of a protest. "What are you talking about?" Nora said, her voice sharp now. "I was with Jessica all weekend. We went to that wine bar I told you about." A pause. Nora's eyes flicked to me, then away. "That's ridiculous," she said. "I don't know why anyone would say that. There's obviously been some kind of misunderstanding." Another pause, longer this time. Nora's face was getting red. "I don't care what photos you think you saw," she said. "I'm telling you, I was with Jessica. Call her yourself if you don't believe me." She hung up without saying goodbye and stared at her phone like it had bitten her. "Everything okay?" I asked mildly, turning a page in my newspaper. "Fine," she said quickly. "Just some family drama. You know how Lacey gets." "Mm-hmm," I said. "More coffee?" The second crack came an hour later. Jessica called while Nora was getting ready for work. "Nora?" I heard Jessica's voice through the phone, unusually loud and angry. "We need to talk. Right now." "Jessica, hi," Nora said, and I could hear the forced calm in her voice. "What's wrong?" "What's wrong is that people keep asking me about our weekend together," Jessica said. "Our weekend that apparently never happened. Our weekend where you were supposedly with me while you were actually screwing around with some married guy." Even from the next room, I could hear Jessica's voice clearly. She wasn't bothering to keep it down. "I don't know what you're talking about," Nora said, but her voice was shaking now. "Cut the crap, Nora," Jessica snapped. "Grant showed me the photos. Grant showed me the text messages. I know you've been using me as your cover story while you have your little affair. How could you do that to me? How could you do that to him?" There was a long silence. Then Nora said, very quietly, "We'll talk about this later." "No," Jessica said. "We won't. Lose my number, Nora. And next time you want to lie to your husband, find someone else to throw under the bus." The line went silent. I heard Nora's phone hit the bathroom counter, followed by what sounded like quiet crying. I finished my coffee and got ready for work, whistling softly. Phase 1 was proceeding exactly as planned. By the time I got home that evening, Nora was in full damage control mode. She met me at the door with a glass of wine and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "How was your day?" she asked, her voice too bright, too cheerful. "Good," I said. "Productive. How was yours?" "Fine," she said quickly. "Great, actually. I finished that big project for the Henderson account." She was lying. I knew she was lying because there was no Henderson account. I'd made that up weeks ago to test whether she was paying attention to anything I said. She'd failed that test, just like she was failing this one. "That's wonderful," I said. "I'm proud of you." We had dinner like a normal couple. Nora chattered nervously about work, about the weather, about anything except the phone calls she'd received that day. I listened and nodded and played the role of the supportive husband, all while watching her squirm. After dinner, she excused herself to make some phone calls. I could hear her in the bedroom, her voice low and urgent. Probably calling Trey, trying to figure out how their secret had gotten out, making plans to contain the damage. Too late for that. Tuesday brought the third crack, and this one was a big one. Nora's phone rang during lunch. Trey's number, according to the caller ID I could see from across the kitchen. "Hey," she answered, glancing around to make sure I wasn't listening. I was, of course, but I pretended to be absorbed in my sandwich. "What do you mean she knows?" Nora's voice was sharp with panic. "How could she know?" A pause. "Photos? What photos? Where did she get photos?" Another pause, longer this time. "This is bad, Trey. This is really bad. My sister called yesterday asking questions, and Jessica won't even talk to me anymore. Someone's been watching us." I took another bite of my sandwich, chewing slowly while my wife's world crumbled around her. "No, I don't think it's Grant," she said, and I had to work hard not to smile. "Grant doesn't pay attention to anything. He probably wouldn't notice if I moved out." "Oh, sweetheart," I thought. "You have no idea what I notice." "We need to be more careful," she continued. "Maybe we should take a break until this blows over." Apparently Trey didn't like that suggestion because Nora's voice got defensive. "I'm not overreacting," she said. "My entire family is asking questions. My best friend won't speak to me. Your wife knows something. This isn't just going to blow over." She hung up a few minutes later and sat staring at her phone. When she looked up and saw me watching her, she jumped slightly. "Work call," she said. Client emergency. Must be a difficult client, I said. You look stressed. It's fine, she said quickly. Just a misunderstanding about a project timeline. Well, I said, standing up and kissing the top of her head, I'm sure you'll figure it out. You're good at handling difficult situations. That evening, Whitney called me with an update. She'd confronted Trey the night before, presenting him with all the evidence we'd gathered. His reaction had been predictably pathetic. Denial, then anger, then attempts at justification. He actually tried to blame me, Whitney said, her voice acidic. Said I'd been distant lately, that he felt neglected, as if that justified screwing around with your wife. What did you tell him? I asked. I told him he had 24 hours to end it with Nora and move out of our apartment, she said. I also told him that if he didn't, I'd be sharing those photos with every business contact in his phone. And he's staying at his office tonight. Apparently your wife isn't taking the breakup well. I wasn't surprised. Nora had always been bad at losing, whether it was a board game or an argument or, apparently, her married boyfriend. She didn't handle rejection gracefully. Wednesday morning, the dam finally burst completely. Nora's phone rang at 6 a.m., waking both of us up. She answered it groggily, then sat bolt upright in bed. Mom? She said. What are you talking about? Who told you that? I lay still, pretending to be asleep, while Nora's mother apparently delivered some very unwelcome news. From Nora's side of the conversation, it sounded like Lacey had been busy spreading the word through the family network. That's not true, Nora said, her voice getting higher. I don't know why Lacey would say that. There's been some kind of misunderstanding. But her mother wasn't buying it, and neither was anyone else. The calls continued throughout the morning. Aunts, cousins, family, friends, all wanting to know if it was true that Nora was having an affair. By the time I left for work, Nora looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hair was a mess, and she kept checking her phones obsessively. Are you feeling okay? I asked, putting on my most concerned husband voice. You look tired. I'm fine, she snapped, then caught herself. Sorry, I didn't sleep well, bad dreams. Maybe you should take a sick day, I suggested. Get some rest. I can't, she said. I have too much work to catch up on. More lies. I knew she didn't have any work lined up. I'd been monitoring her email, and her client list had been shrinking for months, probably because she'd been too distracted by her affair to focus on her business. That evening, I came home to find Nora pacing in the living room, her real phone pressed to her ear. I know what I'm asking, she was saying, but this is important. Can't you just tell people that we were together? Just this once? Whoever she was talking to, probably some other friend she was trying to recruit as an alibi, wasn't cooperating. Nora's voice got more desperate. Please, she said. I'll explain everything later, but right now I just need someone to back up my story. People are saying things about me, terrible things, and they're not true. The conversation didn't last much longer. When she hung up, she looked defeated. Everything all right? I asked. She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating, wondering how much I knew, how much she could safely tell me, whether she could somehow turn me into an ally in her damage control efforts. Grant, she said finally, if someone told you I was having an affair, you wouldn't believe them, would you? And there it was, the moment I'd been waiting for, the perfect opening to drop the hammer and watch her world explode. But I wasn't ready yet. I wanted to savor this a little longer, wanted to see how deep a hole she'd dig for herself before I buried her in it. An affair? I said, raising my eyebrows in apparent surprise. Why would someone say that? I don't know, she said quickly, but apparently someone's been spreading rumors. Lacey called this morning asking all kinds of questions, and my mother's been getting phone calls from relatives. It's crazy. That is crazy, I agreed. Who would make up something like that? I have no idea, she said, but you know I would never do that to you, right? You know I love you. She moved closer, putting her hand on my arm, giving me the same smile that used to make my heart skip. Now it just made me feel tired. Of course I know that, I said. We're married. We trust each other. The relief on her face was almost comical. She actually thought she was going to lie her way out of this. She actually believed she could convince me that months of evidence, dozens of witnesses, and her own suspicious behavior were all just some elaborate misunderstanding. Exactly, she said. We trust each other. That's what marriage is about. Absolutely, I said. Trust is everything. I let her think she'd won, let her believe she'd successfully manipulated me one more time, because tomorrow I was going to show her exactly what happened when you betrayed someone's trust. Tomorrow, the real revenge would begin. Thursday morning, I woke up early and made a decision. I was done playing games. Done pretending. done letting Nora think she could lie her way out of the hole she'd dug. It was time for the confrontation I'd been planning for weeks. I waited until Nora was in the shower, then went to her office and retrieved the secret phone from its hiding place. I scrolled through the messages until I found what I was looking for, a text exchange from the previous night where she and Trey made plans to meet at his apartment that afternoon to figure out how to handle the situation. Perfect. When Nora came downstairs for breakfast, I was sitting at the kitchen table with both phones in front of me, her regular phone and the secret one she thought I didn't know about. She saw them immediately and froze in the doorway, her face going white. "Grant," she said carefully, "what are you doing with my phones?" "Your phones?" I said, picking up the secret device. "Funny, I don't remember you mentioning you had 2 phones. When did you get this one?" She opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. For the first time in months, Nora was speechless. "Let me help you out," I continued, scrolling through the messages. "You got this phone about 4 months ago, right around the time you started working with Trey Dawson. The same Trey Dawson you've been sleeping with every weekend while telling me you were with Jessica." "Grant, I can explain." "Can you?" I interrupted, standing up. "Can you explain this message where you tell him our house will be empty Saturday afternoon? Or this one where you complain about having to pretend to be happy with your boring husband? Or maybe this one where you discuss which hotel has the most comfortable beds?" Each quote hit her like a physical blow. She actually stepped backward, reaching for the door frame to steady herself. "You've been reading my private messages," she said, and there was anger in her voice now, mixed with the fear. "You had no right." "I had no right?" I laughed, and it wasn't a pleasant sound. "I had no right to investigate why my wife was lying to me every single day. I had no right to find out where she was really going on her mysterious girls' weekends." "It's not what you think," she said desperately. "Trey and I were just friends. The messages, they're taken out of context." I held up the phone and read directly from the screen. "Last night was incredible. I've never felt this way about anyone. I can't wait to leave my husband and start a real life with you." Nora's face crumpled. "Grant, please. You sent that message 3 days ago," I said. 3 days ago, you were planning to leave me for your married boyfriend. But now that everyone knows about your affair, now that his wife has kicked him out and your family won't speak to you, suddenly you want to work things out?" "It's not like that," she said, tears starting to flow. "I was confused. I made mistakes. But I love you, Grant. I've always loved you." "No," I said quietly. "You love the idea of me. You love having a stable home and a reliable husband while you run around playing house with other men. But you don't love me, Nora. If you loved me, you wouldn't have spent 4 months lying to my face." She was crying harder now, reaching for me, trying to close the distance between us. "Please, Grant, we can fix this. We can go to counseling. I'll end things with Trey completely. I'll do whatever you want." "You'll end things with Trey?" I said. "According to these messages, he already ended things with you. Yesterday, in fact, right around the time his wife threatened to destroy his business if he didn't stop seeing you." The look of shock on her face told me she hadn't expected me to know that detail. "So let me get this straight," I continued. "Your boyfriend dumped you to save his marriage and his career. Your family won't speak to you. Your friends think you're a liar and a cheat. And now you want to come crawling back to the boring husband you were planning to leave? That's not fair," she said. "You're twisting everything around." "I'm twisting things around?" I picked up a stack of printed emails from the table, correspondence I'd found between Nora and a divorce lawyer, dated 2 weeks ago. "Were you twisting things around when you contacted a lawyer about divorcing me? When you asked about hiding assets and claiming emotional abandonment?" Her face went even whiter. She'd forgotten about those emails, probably thought she'd deleted them from her computer. She hadn't counted on me being thorough. "Or maybe you were twisting things around when you told Trey I was probably too stupid to notice if you moved out," I continued. "When you said I didn't pay attention to anything important?" "I never said that," she whispered. I pulled out my own phone and played an audio recording, Nora's voice, clear and unmistakable, from one of her phone calls with Trey. I'd been recording her conversations for weeks, using an app that activated whenever certain numbers called. "Grant doesn't pay attention to anything," her recorded voice said. "He probably wouldn't notice if I moved out. He's completely oblivious." The sound of her own words seemed to break something inside her. She sank into a chair and put her head in her hands. "How long have you known?" she asked finally. "Long enough," I said. "Long enough to document everything. Long enough to contact Whitney Dawson and compare notes. Long enough to let your family and friends know what kind of person you really are." Her head snapped up. "You told them? You're the one who's been spreading rumors about me?" "I didn't spread rumors," I said calmly. "I shared facts, photos, text messages, hotel receipts. I let people draw their own conclusions about what kind of woman cheats on her husband for 4 months and then lies about it to everyone she knows. You bastard, she said, and now there was real hatred in her voice. You manipulative bastard. You planned all this, didn't you? You've been setting me up. I've been giving you exactly what you deserve, I said. You wanted to play games? You wanted to lie and cheat and treat me like I was too stupid to figure it out? Congratulations, Nora. You played yourself. She stood up abruptly, her hands clenched into fists. You can't do this to me. I won't let you destroy my life over one mistake. One mistake? I laughed again. Nora, you've been having an affair for 4 months. You've lied to me hundreds of times. You contacted a divorce lawyer. You used our friends as unwitting accomplices in your deception. This wasn't one mistake. This was a systematic betrayal of everything our marriage was supposed to mean. Fine, she said, her voice turning cold. You want to play hardball? 2 can play that game. I'll tell everyone you've been spying on me, reading my private messages, recording my phone calls. I'll make you look like a paranoid control freak. Go ahead, I said. Tell them. Tell them how your husband got suspicious when you started lying about where you were going every weekend. Tell them how he investigated and found proof that you were cheating. See how much sympathy you get. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating, trying to find some angle that would let her come out of this as the victim instead of the villain. This isn't over, she said finally. Yes, it is, I replied. Pack your things, Nora. I want you out of my house by tonight. You can't kick me out, she said. This is my house, too. I have rights. Actually, I said, reaching for another folder on the table, you don't. I checked with a lawyer yesterday. Since the house was mine before we got married, and since I can prove you committed adultery, I have every right to ask you to leave. You can fight it in court if you want, but given the evidence I have, I don't think any judge is going to be very sympathetic to your situation. The fight went out of her all at once. She looked around the kitchen, our kitchen, where we'd had breakfast together for 8 years, where we'd planned our future and shared our dreams, and I could see her realizing that it was over, really over. Where am I supposed to go? She asked quietly. I don't know, I said. Call Trey. Maybe he'll take you in now that his wife has kicked him out too. Or call one of your friends. Oh wait, they're not speaking to you either, are they? You're enjoying this, she said. You're actually enjoying watching me fall apart. I'm not enjoying it, I said, and that was mostly true. There was satisfaction in seeing justice done, but no real pleasure in watching the woman I'd once loved destroy herself. But I'm not sorry for it either. You made your choices, Nora. Now you get to live with the consequences. She looked at me for one last moment, and I saw something in her eyes that might have been regret, or maybe just self-pity. With Nora, it was always hard to tell. I did love you, she said quietly. At the beginning. I really did. I know, I said. That's what makes this so much worse. She nodded once, then turned and walked out of the kitchen. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, heard her moving around in the bedroom, packing her things. An hour later, she was gone. I stood in the empty house, surrounded by the wreckage of my marriage, and felt peaceful. For the first time in months, I wasn't wondering where my wife really was, or who she was really with. I wasn't questioning my own sanity or making excuses for behavior that had no excuse. I was free. And Nora? Nora was about to learn that actions have consequences, that lies have a way of catching up with you, and that sometimes the quiet, boring husband you underestimate is the most dangerous enemy you can make. The revenge was complete, but the story wasn't over yet. 3 days after Nora moved out, I got a call from Whitney Dawson. Grant, we need to meet. Something's happened. An hour later, we were sitting in the same coffee shop where we'd planned Nora's downfall, but Whitney looked different now, tired, angry in a way that went bone deep. Trey's been calling me, she said without preamble, begging me to take him back, promising it will never happen again, the usual cheater's playbook, and I told him to go to hell, she said. But that's not why I called you. I called because he let something slip during one of his pathetic apology speeches, something I think you need to know. She pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot of a text message. This is from Nora to Trey, sent yesterday, she said, after you kicked her out. I read the message and my jaw tightened. That manipulative snake. The text read, "Don't worry about Grant. I know things about him that could destroy his business if he tries to cause us any more trouble. He won't be a problem much longer." What kind of things could she know? Whitney asked. I thought about it. Nora had access to my home office, my computer, my business files. She'd been present for client meetings, phone calls, contract negotiations. If she wanted to cause trouble for my landscaping business, she probably could. Nothing illegal, I said finally. But she knows my clients, my pricing structure, my business relationships. She could probably cause some damage if she wanted to. Are you worried? I looked at the message again, feeling that familiar cold anger settling in my chest. No, I said. I'm not worried. I'm pissed. Whitney smiled grimly. Good, because I have an idea. Her plan was elegant in its simplicity. If Nora wanted to play dirty, we'd show her what dirty really looked like. If she thought she could threaten me into backing down, she was about to learn how wrong she was. I still have friends in the business community, Whitney said, people who trust my judgment. If I were to mention that Nora Bennett was unreliable, unprofessional, someone who couldn't be trusted with confidential information, her freelance career would be over, I finished. Exactly. And Trey's already struggling since I started making calls about his extracurricular activities. A few more strategic conversations, and Dawson Creative Marketing will be history. What do you need from me? Just keep doing what you're doing, she said. Document everything. Keep copies of all her threats. And if she tries to follow through on any of them, let me know immediately. I didn't have to wait long. The next morning, I got a call from my biggest client, Margaret Henderson, the society matron whose estate I'd been redesigning. Grant, dear, she said, and her voice was cool in a way that made my stomach drop. I think we need to discuss some concerns that have been brought to my attention. An hour later, I was sitting in Mrs. Henderson's perfectly appointed living room, listening to her relay a conversation she'd had with Nora the day before. She called claiming to be your business partner, Mrs. Henderson said. She said there were some irregularities in your billing practices that I should be aware of. She suggested that you'd been overcharging clients and using substandard materials while claiming they were premium grade. Mrs. Henderson, I said carefully, I don't have a business partner. The woman who called you is my estranged wife, and she's currently trying to cause problems for me because I discovered she was having an affair. Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows rose slightly. I see. That does put a different spin on things. I can provide documentation for every charge on your project, I continued, receipts for all materials, timesheets for all labor, photos of the work in progress. Everything has been exactly as specified in our contract. I'm sure it has, she said, but Grant, you must understand my position. I can't have this kind of drama associated with my property. The garden club ladies are already talking. My heart sank. I could see where this was going. However, she continued, I've known you for 3 years, and your work has always been impeccable. So here's what we're going to do. You're going to finish my project exactly as planned, and then you're going to do something about your wife. Ma'am? I don't care what you have to do, Mrs. Henderson said, her voice turning steel hard. But if that woman makes one more phone call to me or anyone else in my social circle, I will personally make sure that every landscaper in the county knows she's a liar and a troublemaker. Are we clear? Crystal clear, I said. But as I drove home, I realized Mrs. Henderson's threat wouldn't be enough. Nora was desperate now, backed into a corner, and desperate people did stupid things. She'd already tried to sabotage my business once. She'd try again. It was time to end this permanently. I called Whitney from my truck. She made her move, I said, tried to destroy my reputation with my biggest client. What do you want to do about it? Everything, I said. I want to hit her with everything we've got. No more strategic strikes, no more gradual pressure. I want her completely neutralized. Are you sure? Once we do this, there's no going back. I'm sure, I said. She declared war. Time to show her what happens when you pick a fight with someone who's better at it than you are. The final assault began that afternoon. Whitney made calls to every business contact she had, spreading the word about Nora's unprofessional behavior and questionable ethics. I reached out to every client Nora had worked with over the past 2 years, letting them know she was no longer associated with my business and warning them about potential attempts at extortion or sabotage. But the real masterstroke came from an unexpected source, Jessica. I've been thinking about this whole situation, Jessica said when she called me that evening, and I realized something. Nora didn't just use me as an alibi. She used my veterinary clinic, too. What do you mean? Remember all those times she said she was helping me with paperwork at the clinic, working late on inventory or client files? I bet she was actually meeting Trey somewhere else and using the clinic as another cover story. She was right. I found several text messages where Nora had told Trey she could stay late because she was helping Jessica with work stuff. Here's the thing, Jessica continued. My boss is very strict about unauthorized people in the clinic after hours. If he found out Nora had been claiming to be there when she wasn't, he'd probably want to file a police report for fraud or something. Jessica, I can't ask you to. You're not asking, she interrupted. I'm offering. That woman made me an unwitting accomplice in her lies for months. She destroyed our friendship and tried to drag my reputation down with hers. I want her to pay for it. The next morning, Jessica's boss filed a complaint with the Better Business Bureau about Nora's fraudulent claims of association with the veterinary clinic. It was a small thing, legally speaking, but it was public record. Anyone who Googled Nora's name would find it. More importantly, it was the final straw for Nora's remaining clients. By the end of the week, she'd lost every freelance contract she had. Trey didn't fare much better. Whitney's campaign against Dawson Creative Marketing had been devastatingly effective. 3 of his biggest clients had terminated their contracts, citing concerns about the company's professionalism and stability. 2 of his employees had quit. His landlord was threatening eviction for late rent. The affair that was supposed to be their escape from boring, stable marriages had destroyed both their lives. Saturday morning, I was working in my garden when Nora's car pulled into the driveway. I'd been expecting this visit, had actually been surprised it had taken her this long to work up the courage. She looked terrible. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes wrinkled, her eyes red-rimmed from crying or lack of sleep or both. The confident, polished woman who'd walked out of my house a week ago had been replaced by someone who looked broken. "Grant," she said, getting out of the car slowly. "We need to talk." "No, we don't," I said, not looking up from the roses I was pruning. "We said everything that needed to be said." "Please," she said, and her voice cracked. "I know you're angry. I know I hurt you, but this has gone too far." "Has it?" I asked. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're finally experiencing the consequences of your choices." "You've destroyed my life," she said. "My career is over. My family won't speak to me. I can't even get a job at a coffee shop because everyone in town knows what happened. And whose fault is that?" "Yours," she exploded. "You could have just divorced me quietly. You could have handled this like an adult instead of turning it into some kind of revenge fantasy." I finally looked up at her, and she took a step back at whatever she saw in my face. "I handled it exactly the way you deserved," I said quietly. "You lied to me for months. You cheated on me with a married man. You used our friends as accomplices in your deception. You tried to sabotage my business when I found out, and now you want me to feel sorry for you because there were consequences?" "I made mistakes," she said desperately. "But I don't deserve this. No one deserves this." "You're right," I said. "You don't deserve this. You deserve worse. You deserve to feel exactly as betrayed and humiliated as you made me feel. You deserve to know what it's like when the person you trust most in the world turns out to be a liar." She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Grant. I'm so sorry. I know I can't fix what I did, but please, just make it stop. Call off Whitney. Stop spreading stories about me. Let me try to rebuild my life." "No," I said simply. "What?" "No," I repeated. "You made your choices, Nora. You chose to have an affair. You chose to lie to me every day for months. You chose to try to destroy my business when I found out. Now you get to live with the results of those choices." "You can't keep punishing me forever," she said. "I'm not punishing you," I said, turning back to my roses. "I'm just not protecting you from the natural consequences of your actions anymore. There's a difference." She stood there for a long moment, crying quietly. Then she said, "I loved you, you know. I really did." "No," I said, without looking at her. "You loved the idea of having me as a safety net while you played house with other men. But you never loved me, Nora. If you had, none of this would have happened." I heard her car door slam, heard the engine start, heard her drive away, and I knew she wouldn't be back. 3 months later, Whitney called to tell me that Trey had filed for bankruptcy and moved back in with his parents in another state. Nora had apparently followed him there, still clinging to the fantasy that their relationship could survive the wreckage of both their lives. "Think they'll make it?" Whitney asked. "No," I said. "They're both selfish people who betrayed the people who loved them. They'll turn on each other the minute things get difficult." "Probably," she agreed. "What about you? Any plans to start dating again?" I looked out at my garden, at the roses I'd been tending, at the landscape I'd spent years perfecting. It was peaceful here, quiet, honest. "Maybe someday," I said. "But for now, I'm enjoying the silence." And I was. For the first time in years, I was living in a world without lies, without deception, without the constant low-level anxiety that came from knowing something was wrong but not being able to prove it. Nora had thought she was so clever, so sophisticated, so much smarter than her boring husband. She'd thought she could have her cake and eat it too, could live a double life without consequences. She'd been wrong about all of it, and in the end, that was revenge enough.